Imagine stepping out of like a biting, freezing wind, and you throw your shoulder against the heavy double doors of a field station.
Oh, yeah. The wind up here is no joke.
Right, so you force them shut against the gale, you wipe this thick condensation off the interior glass, and the air just immediately hits you.
It's a completely different world inside.
It really is. I mean, it is dense, it's intensely warm, and it smells deeply of damp earth and, growing green things. You are standing inside an Alaskan greenhouse laboratory, completely isolated out here in the tundra.
And the sensory shock of walking into a space like that, it's profound, which makes it, honestly, the perfect environment for today's briefing.
Exactly. So, welcome. We are inviting you, the listener, to step into the mindset of an ecosystem ecologist today.
Right, because we are doing a deep dive into the source material for Unit 5, which is ecosystems and interdependence, and we're dissecting a foundational scientific standard today, MS-LS1-6.
Which, deals primarily with photosynthesis.
Yeah.
But reading a textbook definition of photosynthesis is, well, that's not what we do here.
No, definitely not.
The driving mystery we are investigating in this deep dive is a seemingly impossible question. How does light become living matter?
And to truly unpack that mystery, we have to kind of dismantle how we intuitively assume nature operates.
What do you mean by that?
Well, human beings have a very specific, biased understanding of survival, right? It's based on our own biology. And applying that bias to plants, it leads to some fundamental misunderstandings about the whole architecture of life on Earth.
Oh, I see. Because we tend to anthropomorphize everything. Like, if I ask a random person on the street what a plant eats, they're probably going to say plants eat fertilizer.
Right, or plant food.
Yeah, plant food. Or that they consume dirt through their roots to grow. I mean, we assume because we have mouths and digestive tracts that consume physical bulk, plants must do the exact same thing underground.
Exactly. But that assumption is actually the first major myth our sources dismantle today. The belief that a plant gets its physical mass by eating soil is universally common, but it's entirely false.
Wait,
Entirely. Think about it like this. If you plant a seed in a pot with exactly 100 pounds of soil, and you let that seed grow into a massive tree over, say, 5 years,
Okay.
the soil in that pot will still weigh almost exactly 100 pounds. The tree did not consume the dirt.
Wait, really? That is deeply counterintuitive.
I know, right?
Because when I look at a massive 1,000-pound spruce tree in the forest, my brain just refuses to accept that all of that heavy, dense wood didn't come out of the solid ground.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. If the dirt is untouched, then that 1,000 pounds of wood essentially materialized out of thin air and sunshine.
That's precisely what happened.
Yeah.
The physical mass of that giant spruce tree comes predominantly from carbon dioxide, which is an invisible gas in the atmosphere, and water.
Just air and water, wow.
Yeah. The plant captures that gas and uses light energy to synthesize its own food, specifically sugars, out of those simple inputs.
Okay, that actually reminds me of a 3D printer.
Oh, how so?
Well, if I want to print a plastic toy, I need a spool of plastic filament, right? That's the physical matter. And I also need to plug the printer into the wall for the electrical energy to actually run the machine.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
So in this scenario, the plant is the 3D printer. But instead of pulling solid plastic from a spool, it is pulling invisible carbon right out of the air.
That 3D printer visual is a helpful starting point, definitely. But it actually kind of underplays the complexity of what's happening.
Really? How so?
Well, a 3D printer simply melts and reshapes existing plastic, right? A plant is pulling raw, invisible gas from the air and physically ripping the molecular bonds apart using the sheer force of solar radiation.
Oh.
Yeah, it's intense. And then stitching those isolated atoms together into completely new structures. It would be like a 3D printer sucking in the air from your living room and printing a solid oak table.
Okay, yeah, that distinction makes the process sound significantly more violent at a molecular level.
It really is.
And so, in that analogy, the electricity powering the printer is the sunlight. Because light itself has no mass, right? Like, you can't weigh a sunbeam.
Exactly. You can't put a photon on a scale.
Right, so it acts purely as the energy source required to force those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms into a new configuration, which we call glucose.
And understanding that distinction, between the physical atoms and the power source driving them, that leads us to the golden rule of ecology.
Oh, lay it on me.
If you, as an ecosystem ecologist, retain only one concept from our time in this field station today, it should be this: Matter cycles, but energy flows.
Matter cycles, but energy flows. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's separate those two mechanics.
Yeah.
Because the sources emphasize that matter, like the physical stuff made of atoms, it cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes shape.
Correct. The carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms operating in our Alaskan ecosystem here are finite. They're continuously recycled.
Okay, so give me an example of how that cycles.
Well, imagine a carbon atom floating in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. It gets pulled into a tundra willow leaf, then it gets stitched into a sugar molecule.
Right.
Then a caribou eats the willow, incorporating that carbon into its muscle. A wolf eats the caribou and eventually exhales that exact same carbon atom back into the wind. The physical pieces never disappear.
Okay, so they're like a massive set of Lego bricks.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the ecosystem has a set number of pieces. You build a spaceship, you smash it, and you use the exact same bricks to build a castle.
Exactly.
But energy does not behave like a Lego brick
Right.
because the rule says energy flows, meaning it is a one-way street. It doesn't cycle back around.
Right. Energy is the capacity to do work. And the laws of thermodynamics dictate that every time energy changes form, a significant portion of it is lost as dissipated heat.
So it literally just bleeds off into the universe.
Yeah. Solar radiation floods into the ecosystem from the sun. The plant captures a fraction of it, stores it in the chemical bonds of its sugar, but when the caribou eats the plant, it burns most of that energy just staying warm, running, keeping its heart beating.
That makes sense.
And all that energy radiates off the caribou's body as heat, leaving the ecosystem forever.
Meaning you can never recycle the energy.
Right. Never.
So to stick with the toys, if matter is the Lego bricks, energy is like the battery inside the Lego motor.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the whole thing move, but once the battery runs down and loses its charge to heat, it's completely dead.
You need a brand new battery.
Right. You have to go to the store.
Mhm.
And Earth constantly needs a brand new supply of photons from the sun.
Without that relentless influx of solar energy, the chemical bonds holding the ecosystem together would just stop forming.
Wow.
And this actually brings up a crucial nuance about plants. Lots of people assume plants photosynthesize during the day merely to provide food for animals.
Oh yeah, like they're just setting up a buffet for us.
Exactly. But in reality, a plant's primary goal is its own survival. They're continuously consuming the very sugars they produce.
Wait, if the plant is making the sugar, how does that translate to it growing taller? I mean, I understand using sugar for immediate energy, but how does sugar become structural wood?
Good question. Plants utilize the sugar in two ways. First, through a process called cellular respiration, they constantly break down a portion of the sugar they just made to power their own daily cellular functions.
Even at night.
Yes, even in the dead of night. Second, they take the remaining sugar molecules and chain them together into complex, rigid polymers like cellulose.
Oh, cellulose, really?
Yeah, cellulose is the structural fiber that makes up the bulk of a plant's stems, its leaves, and eventually the heavy wood of a tree trunk.
Okay, so taking these underlying mechanics out of the theoretical realm for a second, the curriculum notes point us toward the extreme environments of Alaska to see this operating at an immense scale.
Yeah, the scale is incredible.
Like, the Bering Sea and the Gulf of Alaska showcase this perfectly. Because in the depths of winter, those waters are brutally cold and largely dark, meaning the primary energy input is essentially unplugged.
Exactly. The water column becomes relatively dormant. But as the Earth tilts toward the spring, the hours of incoming solar radiation rapidly increase.
And then, boom.
Right, boom. This massive influx of energy triggers an explosive biological event. It's a bloom of microscopic phytoplankton, particularly diatoms.
Diatoms are so fascinating because they encase themselves in these beautiful glass-like silica shells.
They're gorgeous under a microscope.
And when trillions of them suddenly have the energy to photosynthesize simultaneously, the scale of the matter cycling must be staggering. They're just pulling colossal amounts of dissolved carbon dioxide directly out of the ocean water.
The scale is so massive that these diatom blooms are clearly visible from space.
Wait, from space? Really?
Yeah. They paint entire swaths of the ocean, green and turquoise. They are frantically stitching that dissolved carbon into living biomass. And this single, localized conversion of light into living matter forms the foundation of the entire marine food web.
So that vast field of tiny, sugar-filled glass boxes becomes the fuel source.
Exactly.
Microscopic crustaceans called krill gorge on the diatoms. Then, massive schools of herring sweep in to consume the krill, and finally, the apex predators like salmon and orcas arrive.
And remember the rule. At each step of that trophic cascade, energy is dissipating.
Because it's a one-way flow.
Right. The krill burn energy swimming, the herring burn energy evading predators. By the time you reach the salmon, only a tiny fraction of the original solar energy captured by the diatoms actually remains.
Ah, so that's why an ecosystem can support trillions of diatoms with only a relatively small number of large predators.
Exactly. The energy flow tapers off dramatically.
Now, looking at the Denali National Park dataset we have here in the sources, the numbers documenting the carbon cycle on the tundra are wildly dramatic.
Oh, they flip completely.
Yeah, the chart shows the subarctic landscape absorbing massive amounts of atmospheric carbon in July, like a giant sponge.
Yeah.
But then in December, the same landscape is violently hemorrhaging carbon dioxide and methane back into the sky. If the tundra plants are completely dormant in the winter, what on earth is producing all that gas?
So that data captures something called the carbon balance flip, and it highlights this hidden microbial world.
Oh, right, microbes.
See, during the summer, the subarctic experiences up to 24 hours of continuous daylight. Shrubs, like the tundra willow, exploit this endless energy, photosynthesizing relentlessly and pulling vast amounts of carbon out of the air.
So it acts as a massive carbon sink. The landscape is taking a deep, sustained inhalation of carbon.
Beautifully put. But as winter sets in, the sun disappears, the energy flow stops, and photosynthesis halts.
So the plants go dormant.
They do, but beneath the insulating layer of snow, the soil is still teeming with microbes, fungi, and bacteria.
And they don't photosynthesize.
No, they rely on cellular respiration. All winter long, in the pitch black, they are breaking down the dead roots and fallen leaves from the summer.
So they're essentially eating the landscape's leftovers. And just like us, when they consume food for energy, they exhale carbon dioxide as a waste product.
You got it. And the sheer volume of trillions of soil microbes exhaling all winter long flips the entire Denali landscape from a carbon sink into a massive carbon source.
It is wild.
The localized flow of solar energy dictates the breathing pattern of the entire biome, and we see similar intricate relationships in the coastal temperate rainforests of southeast Alaska, particularly of lichens.
Oh, lichens. They drape over everything in those damp forests, but they aren't actually a single plant, right? They're a symbiotic partnership.
Yes, they're a composite organism. You have a fungus, which provides a structural lattice and absorbs moisture from the damp Alaskan air. It acts as the physical housing.
Okay, the house.
Embedded within that fungus are photosynthetic algae or cyanobacteria.
So the algae acts as the solar panel for the house.
Exactly.
It captures the filtered forest light, synthesizes the sugars, and pays the fungus rent in the form of chemical energy. Together, they can survive on bare rock where neither could live alone, which jumpstarts the nutrient cycle for the surrounding forest.
It's a perfect partnership.
You know, we speak about this process now with such certainty, like the idea that plants rip water and carbon dioxide apart using light. But historically, scientists were completely stumped by this invisible machinery.
Oh, absolutely. They knew plants absorbed carbon dioxide and water, and they knew plants released oxygen gas into the air, but they had the mechanics all wrong.
Right, because the logical assumption they made is completely understandable. They looked at the chemical formula for carbon dioxide, which is CO2.
Yes.
And they assumed the plant took in the gas, cleaved off the two oxygen atoms, released that O2 into the atmosphere, and just kept the remaining carbon atom to build its physical structure.
It makes elegant, intuitive sense. Just chop the molecule in half. But the actual breakthrough proving that assumption wrong didn't even involve studying green plants.
Wait, really?
No. The scientist who solved the oxygen mystery, Cornelis van Niel, was investigating something called purple sulfur bacteria.
Hang on, why look at a stagnant pond microbe to understand how a spruce tree operates? That doesn't seem to connect.
Well, Van Niel was operating on the core scientific principle that biological mechanisms often share ancient evolutionary roots.
Oh, I see.
Purple sulfur bacteria live in extreme environments, like hot springs or stagnant, oxygen-deprived mud. Instead of utilizing water, which is H2O, these bacteria use hydrogen sulfide, H2S.
Hydrogen sulfide. Isn't that the gas that smells intensely like rotten eggs?
It is, and on the early Earth, before our atmosphere was rich in oxygen, splitting hydrogen sulfide was biologically easier than splitting water.
Because water is tough to break.
Water is a remarkably stable molecule. It takes immense power to rip it apart. Van Niel observed that these purple bacteria were using light energy to photosynthesize, but instead of releasing oxygen gas as a byproduct, they were releasing pure, solid sulfur.
Wow. So they split the H2S, kept the hydrogen to build their sugars and threw the sulfur out as waste.
Exactly. And Van Niel recognized the parallel. If the bacteria use light to split H2S and discard the sulfur, then it stands to reason that green plants must be using light to split H2O and discarding the oxygen.
Which is a process called photolysis, right?
Yeah.
Using light to split apart the water molecule.
Yes.
It means the oxygen we are breathing right now doesn't come from the carbon dioxide in the air.
Yeah.
It comes entirely from water molecules being violently torn apart by sunshine.
And this hypothesis was later definitively proven using an ingenious tracking method. Scientists provided plants with water containing a heavy isotope of oxygen, oxygen-18.
Ah, like a molecular GPS tracker.
Exactly. They tracked the heavy oxygen and then monitored the gases the plant released.
Let me guess. Every single molecule of oxygen gas the plant emitted registered as the heavy oxygen-18 isotope. None of the oxygen from the carbon dioxide was released.
The proof was undeniable. The plant was fracturing the water. And this uncovers a rather humbling truth about our relationship with plants. We frequently praise forests for, producing oxygen for us to breathe, framing it as some sort of planetary benevolence.
Like they're doing us a favor, but the plant has no use for the oxygen gas. It isn't making it for us.
Not at all. Oxygen is simply a metabolic byproduct. During the Great Oxidation Event billions of years ago, the sudden accumulation of this oxygen waste was actually highly toxic to much of the existing life on Earth.
Toxic waste.
Yeah. To the plant, the oxygen is the exhaust pipe of the photosynthesis engine. The sugar is the prized objective, the oxygen is the trash.
Wow.
The fact that animal life subsequently evolved to rely on that toxic waste product is a marvel of evolutionary opportunism, not the plant's intended goal.
Okay, so if I am trying to distill this entire curriculum framework, this MS-LS1-6 standard, down to its core philosophy for our ecosystem ecologists listening, it really comes down to three things.
Let's hear it.
The claim we are making about reality, the evidence we can observe, and the logical reasoning connecting them.
Structuring scientific thought that way is incredibly useful for cutting through the noise. What is the fundamental claim we can make based on everything we've explored today?
The claim is that photosynthesis is the mechanism that forces matter to cycle and allows energy to flow into living organisms. It is the gatekeeper between the non-living universe and the biological world.
Perfect. And the observable evidence supporting that claim.
Well, we can measure that plants, algae, and certain bacteria take in carbon dioxide, water, and light. We can measure that they output complex sugars and release oxygen gas. We can even trace the heavy isotopes.
Which brings us to the reasoning. The mechanism bridging the evidence to the claim.
Right. The reasoning is grounded in conservation and thermodynamics. The physical matter, the atoms from the air and the water, it's torn apart and rearranged into new structural molecules, ensuring the atoms are conserved and cycled.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, the kinetic energy of the solar radiation is captured, transformed into chemical energy, and locked inside those sugar bonds. That captured energy is what powers the metabolism of every other organism on the planet before it ultimately bleeds away as heat.
And when you grasp that reasoning, the vocabulary becomes secondary. You aren't just memorizing chemical equations for a test, you are comprehending the literal engine of existence.
It induces a complete paradigm shift. Because the next time you look at a leaf on a sidewalk, or a towering kelp bed in the ocean, or even the weeds growing through a crack in the pavement, you no longer just see passive greenery.
You really don't.
You are looking at billions of microscopic silent machines actively pulling the invisible sky down to the earth and spinning sunlight into living matter.
That transformation is happening silently all around you, driving the machinery of the entire planet.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry out of the field station today. We've examined the marine food webs of the Bering Sea and the microbial life beneath the Denali snowpack.
But the principles of matter cycling and energy flow govern your immediate surroundings just as strictly.
Exactly. So as you step back into your own life, look closely. Where can you see evidence of light becoming living matter in your own environment?